City of Stevens Point Redevelopment Authority meeting, recorded June 20th, 2023.
I will call the June 20th, 2023 Redevelopment Authority to order. The director will take the roll.
Schleiss.
Here.
Gardner.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Cooper.
Here.
Kemeter is excused. Laddick is excused. And Barrett.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Good. Item number 1, approval of minutes from the February 23rd, 2023 Redevelopment Authority meeting.
Move approval of those minutes.
Dave?
Second.
John, second. Comments, questions? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Number 2, approval of minutes from the April 25th, 2023 Redevelopment Authority meeting.
Move to approve.
Mary?
Second.
Dave? Discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of financial reports from March 23 to April 2023. Director?
Nothing significant to point out, just standard in proceeding as part of it. I will state that we will get our audit next month, the final audit. Preliminary results look good, so no one's stealing money so far.
So far?
So far.
So far.
Not that they found, so.
Oh, I'll have to talk to Don. Any questions? Motion to accept and place on file.
Move to accept and place on file.
John?
Second.
Jim? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. Number 4, request from city staff to fund a consultant for the creation of a community land trust. Director?
Thank you. Today, Connie is here to do a presentation on a community land trust. Part of the reason that this is before you is kind of twofold. One is the Redevelopment Authority owns a number of parcels kind of scattered throughout the city that would be good candidates for the Community Land Trust. Second is you are also the caretaker of the Housing Trust Fund, which in its current state has a fair amount of money in it. We put a fair amount of money into a CD a few years ago that is coming to be a mature CD, so we have an opportunity here to be a partner in the Community Land Trust. Second is, as our TIF districts are closing, the state of Wisconsin now allows us to extend the life of those TIFs for 1 year, and all the increment for that 1-year extension would have to go into what they call an established housing trust fund, with the intention of it being afforded to affordable housing. So we have the housing trust fund that's already established. The intention of my office and the comptroller's office is to do an extension on all of our TIFs for 1 year, get that incremental, the additional increment, and put that in the housing trust fund, which this body has the ultimate authority and control over. So I guess I'll turn it over to Chris, if you have anything else you want to state, otherwise do the presentation.
Yeah, so thank you, Director. In the memo, I had included some information, some background information for you all on the city's recent efforts to wrap up a housing task force and the recommendations within that report to improve housing diversity, affordability, homeownership throughout the community. And it just so happened that alongside that housing task force, there was a community group coming together to also explore the feasibility of a community land trust. So it was very fitting that one of our recommendations just so happened to also be establishing a community land trust, going through the process, understanding what our tools would be to organize one. And we're so lucky to have great community partners who were thinking similarly. So in that report, one of the recommendations is for the city of Stevens Point to organize a community land trust, and Connie is one of the members of that community land trust organizing group. Connie will give you some more information about that group. But it's a tool that we can use as a community to establish more home ownership and to bring more people into the private or the open real estate market. So Connie, if you would like to take the floor.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. Thanks for allowing us to be here tonight and talk about community land trusts. We do feel they are an affordable housing solution, and we'll get into kind of a little bit of the nuts and bolts of how they work. Next slide, please. So actually, I thought I'd start off with this first slide. I just happened to notice that it was National Homeownership Month, the month of June, and the President has proclaimed June National Homeownership Month, and with that, it highlights the power of homeownership, planting roots in the community, building equity, and passing down generational wealth, which I think we're all in favor of. Next slide, please. So this is something I just wanted to illustrate that CAP's mission, vision, goals, and strategies, I'm with CAP Services, Director of Housing Stability there, our mission, vision, goals, and strategies closely align with those of the Redevelopment Authority and the City of Stevens Point. And specifically, when we talk about the goals and the strategies that we're following and that the CLT work group is following, we have a very strong guidepost in the goal of developing pathways to home ownership, specifically for people in poverty. And then we have a strategy that we're working toward, and this work group is working toward, is developing a community land trust so that people with low incomes can buy homes at a lower cost, and then those properties stay affordable into the future, and it becomes a perpetually affordable housing option. And again, we'll go into a little bit more detail as we go along. Next, please. So this is just a little short video. It's about 1.5 minutes long, and I thought it was one of the best videos I've seen on kind of how to explain how a CLT works and how it serves to make things perpetually affordable. Go ahead.
Community land trusts, or CLTs, are nonprofit organizations that acquire, own, and steward land permanently for the common good. The most common CLT land use is housing, but retail, office, and a variety of other uses are possible. CLTs give formal decision-making voice and power to local community residents in determining land uses. Here's how CLTs make home buying affordable for families in their communities. First, the CLT builds or buys homes using one-time public or private investment. Next, the CLT sells just the home to a low-income buyer who qualifies for a mortgage, and the CLT keeps the land, holding it in trust for future generations of home buyers. In return for being able to buy a home at a discounted price, the family agrees to pay it forward and sell to another low-income family at a price they can afford. The CLT manages the sales process, ensuring that each home-buying family builds some wealth from a predetermined, limited amount of the sales proceeds. In this way, the one-time public or private investment in CLT homes makes lasting affordability a reality and stabilizes communities. And CLTs benefit the larger community too, as they preserve and protect housing for long-term residents, helping to build stronger, safer, and higher quality diverse neighborhoods, contributing to greater educational attainment, employment opportunities, and health outcomes. Visit groundedsolutions.org to learn more about CLTs today.
Thank you. Also, if anybody has any questions, are we going to hold questions for the end of the presentation? Would that be best?
Go ahead and ask them as we're going along.
Okay. Sounds good. You can go ahead. So just a brief history of CLTs in the United States. The original CLTs actually came out of the civil rights movement. In the late 1950s, black families were often not awarded land ownership, even after maybe they were sharecroppers on that land. And so moving into the civil rights movement kind of looked at the CLT model, the community trust model, and that's where the community land trust kind of sprung out of, is that kind of a need for land ownership. Currently, there are over 300 CLTs throughout the nation in 42 states and D.C. and Puerto Rico. We did see quite a surge, an exponential growth in CLTs during the 1990s when housing prices shot up. And then now, too, because, homes are just escalating like crazy in most parts of the country and even here. And it's something that coincides then with the expansion of more CLTs. So the CLTs are coming along trying to, solve the problem of affordable housing, which is a crisis. Next one. So, and right in the state of Wisconsin, there are currently 4 CLTs that are in operation now. One of the first, I think it was the first CLT in Wisconsin was in Madison. It's called Troy Gardens. It's a 31-acre complex, and they have 30 homes that are affordable homes, but they also have an organic farm, and they have community gardens and a restored prairie. Milwaukee just started their first CLT in 2022, where they brought in 5 homes into and under their CLT umbrella. They have ambitious goals for 2023. They'd like to add 12 more by the end of the year, and then in 24 more homes. La Crosse, one of the CAP services agencies, Cooley Cap, out of La Crosse, started their CLT in 2009. They have about 20 homes under their umbrella. Door County has the newest CLT. It's going very, very well up there. They caught the attention of Governor Evers. He went and visited, and he was quite impressed by not only, what they had accomplished in kind of a short time, but also how it was positively affecting their communities so early on. Right now, also, there are 3 more community trusts in Wisconsin that we know of. At CAP Services, we're a member of the Shared Equity Housing Coalition throughout the state, and in that we all meet together, different groups that are trying to form CLTs, and we, share tips and learned lessons and things like that. And so we know that Eau Claire is in discussion with for their CLT. They are doing one hopefully soon up in Bayfield County, and then we're discussing CLTs right here in Stevens Point tonight. Next slide. So this is a statistic, very favorable, obviously, but just to explain it a little bit, my background is in real estate, and I remember helping a lot of first-time homeowners, especially first-timers, and other homeowners as well, home buyers. And we always use the figure, try to keep your monthly housing costs at 30% of your monthly income or under. And what this slide shows is that nationwide, in CLTs, 95% of those homes are affordable to residents who are low or middle income, moderate income individuals. And we gauge low and moderate income according to the average median income, the area median income. And the 80% and below is covering that group that is low to moderate income. So 95% of the homes in CLTs are affordable for low and moderate income individuals. Next slide, please. This is a little bit more of the nuts and bolts into as how does a CLT actually make things not only affordable, but permanently affordable, generation after generation, year after year. So the first thing is the CLT will purchase the land, as it said in the video, and then lease the land to the low and middle and moderate income residents who are owning the properties, the homes on that land. And the CLT figuratively separates the ownership of the home from the land, which actually helps reduce the mortgage, reduces the principal of the mortgage for the homeowner, which in effect lowers their monthly mortgage payments. Then the land is leased to the homeowners, and the land is then tied into the home by way of a ground lease. And typically in CLTs, it's a 99-year ground lease. Now, in that ground lease, many things are laid out and agreed to, and there are a few of them listed here. The CLT agreements require that the homes be owner-occupied and that they may not be rented, or if a homeowner is thinking, okay, I've lived here now 7 years, I want to just sell to the highest bidder, and then someone comes in, buys it, rehabs it, and flips it. That's not what this is about. And so there are strict requirements in the leases that forbid that activity. And then when they want to sell the home in the CLT, they don't have to sell, but if they want to sell, if and when they want to sell, they sell it back to the CLT, or they can sell it to another low-income or moderate-income individual. Now, you might wonder, okay, how are the sale prices established in the first place? Those are all established ahead of time through the lease, stated categorically in the lease, and they are established through what's called resale formulas. Most of those formulas include some percentage of equity going back to that homeowner. They've lived there, they've maybe made improvements, they deserve certainly some equity. They don't, in most cases, receive all of the equity, but it's a percentage of it. And then they get to take that. Most of the people, as you can read in the last couple of sentences there, actually do sell it then and move into the open market where they're paying regular market prices. Also, they can sell it to another low to moderate income person. The CLT usually administers things like income verification and handles all the paperwork and explains everything to everyone. And again, they are restricted on the price that they can sell it for, and that is established in the resale formula. The last two sentences, just these are average nationwide figures that we've learned about. Most homeowners do go out on the open market when they are ready to purchase their next home. And this is what caught my eye as a former realtor. Foreclosures among CLT homeowners average I think it's less than 1%. So the CLT enables the low and moderate income homeowner to get into an affordable priced home with subsidies provided by private donors, public donations, I'm not sure what the word is there. All those subsidies help to bring the price down, and then of course the homeowner has a mortgage, and there are certain things that the CLTs can do to help those homeowners as they progress through their homeownership period. If they get behind on their mortgage or whatever, there are certain things in place. That's another thing that the CLT does and administers. All right, next slide.
Just
sure,
real quick,
sure.
too. You might be asking yourselves, well, doesn't Habitat for Humanity serve in this role in some capacity? And the answer is yes. But once that those recipients of the Habitat for Humanity home are outside, I think it's a 5 or 7 year period, they can go essentially and sell the home on the open market, which no longer allows that home to be strictly used for affordable housing. So that's probably one of the biggest difference between the land trust and the habitat component, just as an FYI in case that's going through your head. So.
Yep.
If I could go back, you say you've got a lease on the land. Is there a specific percentage that we'd get as a payment for that, or is it $1 and other good and valuable for consideration?
Do you mean as far as return on your investment?
Correct.
There is. I don't know what it would be, honestly.
And typically within a community land trust, the property is purchased and then owned by the community land trust itself. So it's not that the property would be retained by the Redevelopment Authority. It would, if
It
the
is
community land trust
correct.
is
It's
formed, it would
owned
be
by the
community
homeowner
land.
themselves. Yep. The return on the investment is there. I'm just not sure of the, machinations that have to be done in order to ensure that. But it's kind of funny because right now the work group is working through about a 200-page technical manual where all of those things are covered. And I don't think we've gotten to ROI just yet for investors, but it's there. I don't know the percentage. It probably depends on which market you're in and how your CLT is organized, structured. Does that answer your question, or maybe not?
No.
Okay. So what we're asking for tonight is $15,000 to cover the scope of work of a consultant that we've picked. Her name is Julie Brunner. She has over 27 years of experience with community land trusts. She was a key player in the very first community land trust in the United States, which was on Orcas Island in Washington State. And if you're familiar with Orcas Island, it is kind of a tourist area, has a lot of restaurants and things like that. And they found, again, over 27 years ago, I think it was 30 years ago actually, that they had plenty of service people they could hire for the restaurants, waiters, waitresses, things like that, but they had nowhere to house them. And that's something that we're seeing in our communities every day. So they were the first community land trust in the United States, and Julie spearheaded that effort. And ever since then, she has been a consultant all across the country and in Wisconsin to help others form community land trusts as well. She was also, while she was doing the community land trust, she was the housing director there on Orcas Island. And she does work with Grounded Solutions Network. That's a national association for groups that would like to start community land trusts. They're a very helpful organization as far as supplying resources and things like that. She has a master's degree in city and regional planning from Rutgers and a BA in international studies and economics from Virginia Tech. We feel she's extremely well qualified. She's been highly recommended by all of the CLTs in Wisconsin and the ones that are coming online. So we thought we'd put a slide in that explains what the goals of our work group are at this time. Number one, we'd like to create a structure to preserve housing affordability into the future, permanently preserve public and private investments in perpetual affordable housing, maintain existing and/or develop new affordable housing units. One of the big perks that we see in the CLT is that under the CLT umbrella, there can be many variations of housing. You can have a multi-unit development there. You can have a new single-family development in that umbrella, under the umbrella. You can have existing homes, what they refer to as scattered sites, under that umbrella. So it can be different configurations depending on the needs of the area. Number 4, we want to increase home ownership for people at or below 80% CMI, and then increase equitable home ownership for people who are marginalized. Many who are marginalized are people of color and fall into that low to moderate income group. Just thought we'd put a slide in case you are curious as to who the work group is made up of. Christy is my colleague at CAPS Services. Chris is here. Ryan Karnowski. Greg Hansel is with Community Volunteer with Refugees and a board member of Catholic Charities. Gary Veltis from Catholic Charities. Ashley, the president of Central Wisconsin Habitat for Humanity and also a current realtor. And eventually, maybe sooner than later, we would like to include a mortgage lender, a local mortgage lender, and I would envision a more local attorney, and then hopefully a local person who is of lower or moderate income so that they have a voice in this formation, and then eventually a construction partner. And that's it.
Question, where does the CLT get its funding from? You're saying that if the person got behind on their mortgage, or somebody trashed a house and it's not worth what the mortgage is,
Yep.
and you're going to have to pay that off, where do they get their funding from to recover that?
Yep. So initially, the CLT is set up with the help of many, many different partners in the community. And we don't know technically how all those details work yet, but imagine all of that money going into a pot that would be used as subsidy to lower that price for when they buy the home. But in addition to that, it's recommended, highly recommended, that a reserve fund be set up by the CLT that covers maintenance, especially the larger maintenance projects that certain homeowners may not be able to afford, so that those properties are all maintained. And the ground lease and then the reserve fund lease are charged to the homeowner monthly, usually. Most ground leases are maybe like $35 a month, and then the reserve fund fee would be whatever is established there to cover the entire fund. So that's how that's approached. Another big benefit of a CLT is you basically can organize it and structure it in the way that works best for you. What they caution you on is making sure that you have a plan B when maintenance is an issue, and make sure that you have many voices at the table when you're forming the CLT. Make sure that you take your time and do due diligence in the process of setting up the CLT. Many CLTs will take 3 to 5 years before they're online. Some parts of it can come online a lot sooner, but they caution you you don't want to rush into things. You don't want to rush making decisions, and things like that. I might have got a little off track there.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the CLT work group is here asking is to hire Julie, because there are a few in Wisconsin, and we've had some really good conversations with our peers in Door County and Milwaukee and Madison, but what works for them might not work specifically for Stevens Point, and Julie's going to be able to help us really hone in on what is going to work, where we can get the funding from, how we're going to establish it as the community land trust, and that's really what the main ask for Redevelopment Authority is tonight, is for the funding up to the $12,000 to hire Julie, bring her in, have her help us establish the land trust and work through, I think, some of the more technical questions.
Absolutely.
That not necessarily the land trust group is able to answer themselves.
Right, exactly. And I think a scope of work for Julie was shared. I'm not sure.
It's included within the board packets.
Yeah, and so you can see on that, she gets into the weeds. She helps you establish the resale formulas depending on your market. She helps you with budget. She helps you with writing bylaws. It's the whole package there, and she's extremely experienced, as I said before.
I see that the contract is up to $12,000. There's a number of different organizations you alluded to in your presentation, but it appears that you're asking the Redevelopment Authority to pay 100% of this with nothing coming in from these other organizations?
Well, at this time, we aren't even structured enough to go out and, have outreach for those other public and private funds. So by bringing Julie on, she gets us on that path and directs us in the right way to do that.
And I will add in that the National League of Cities references some of the major supports that municipalities can play in establishing a community land trust is the initial financing for a consultant to come in and establish the community land trust with the community.
I'll open up for questions, comments. John?
I'm supportive of the goals of the group. It seems that we have to have, I would be more comfortable with more conversation about some examples of how this works, how that working group you had before, have them present to us and to your group, formalize or develop more ideas of how you would apply that in Stevens Point. I don't know that we necessarily have to have all the details that Ms. Bruner is talking about before we start talking about some of the concepts. For example, the chairman brought up a minute ago about ongoing servicing of these properties. One of the things I read in the Lincoln Institute policy manual is there's a fair amount of oversight that's required. And I don't know who's going to do it, how much money it's going to cost, where that's coming from, those sorts of things. The other thing was the formulas that you talk about for repurchase of the properties. I'd like to see some examples brought out. If somebody purchased an existing home and the trust rehabbed it, sold that property, what would the timeline be for a 5-year, 7-year ownership, and how would, given the history of what the adjusted gross income has been, what would the purchase price be, sale price be? Just some examples. Or if you did new construction, which I'm assuming you're alluding to if you're talking about vacant land, then what would that be? What would the example of that be? And I think the group could develop, with the help maybe of some of the other communities, or even with Julie perhaps, some of those scenarios before we buy the farm.
Sure. The thing with it is that it's so complex. And so all of those points that she mentioned guide us on all those different things that you just mentioned. And to proceed without her guidance on those, I would warn against that.
So I think, John, what you're asking is exactly where the land trust group is at right now. We have kind of collectively said this is something that we want to pursue, but we don't know how this could all work and how this would all function because none of us are professionals in community land trusts. And so really what we're proposing to bring Julie in to do is kick it off and get more into the details. No different than when you hire a consultant for some other work that you might be doing. A good example would be, we are not experts in wayfinding signage, but we hired an expert in wayfinding signage at a significant cost to come in and look at where it makes sense to put signs up. I mean, in a much different sense, but similar concept. We're just at the point now with the land trust group that we need to start answering those questions, and we don't have the knowledge or the expertise to do that, and that's why we're asking the Redevelopment Authority to cover this initial cost, to bring in Julie to help lay the groundwork for setting the CLT up to be a successful organization. And like I said earlier, the Redevelopment Authority will be a partner in it regardless because of the scattered sites that we own and because of the Housing Trust Fund. I think that's a pool of money that both the Redevelopment Authority, the CLT, and the city would like to see put out there for affordable housing. I think that's the reason it was established.
When I read this proposal, it seems to me she's doing from A to Z. Mm-hmm. And I'd be interested in A to F, A to D. I want an opening before I buy the rest of the details and all the paperwork and all the information on
Sure. So there was another scope of work that she had put together that was, I believe, $5,000 or $6,000. That wasn't included in the packet because staff was just here to ask for the whole kit and caboodle. Mm-hmm. But if you would feel more comfortable with that, I think authorizing up to the $6,000, that definitely puts us in the right direction then.
I don't know about the other members, but before I buy the whole package, I'm interested in learning how applicable it's going to be in this real estate market in Stevens Point. That's my perspective.
Dave, Jim, Mary?
I think that's part of the problem. We don't know what we need until we hire someone to show us how to get there. I think it's a small price to pay for an investment in home ownership in the city. So I'm in support of doing it now.
I think one of the things, just to interject if I can a little bit here, I can't remember the details of the smaller scope of work, but I know for a fact in the larger one that she helps a great deal with the market research. And I think that's something that's going to be very, very important to have. We need to research Stevens Point, maybe Portage County, not sure. We need to identify the critical housing needs and where they are and who they're serving. And she helps with all of that and points us in the right direction so that we're not just spinning our wheels.
I think we've been looking for a solution for affordable housing for quite a while. and we've been kicking or picking at the edges and trying to sort that out, and this looks like an actual viable path that has been established elsewhere. And so I think it's a good investment as well.
I agree with what John's saying. I just don't know where those lines are. I don't know, is that 1 through 4 and 7, and I don't know where A to F is, unfortunately, but.
Well, I got a question for you, Dave. How easy is it to get a loan for a property that you don't own the land?
Well, I was going to ask that question, but I didn't know if it was appropriate. I don't know if we were getting into the gritty details of the program itself.
I was also going to ask, would they be eligible for the modernization program?
What we know is that you have a few key financial partners that understand the model. And that buy into the program, and then as folks come through the program, you kick them towards the preferred financial partners. My understanding is some of the national banks are used to this because it is a very popular model. So, your U.S. banks, your J.P. Morgan Chase, they are more comfortable with it. And then, of course, identifying local partners, because it's really if you want to talk about financial partnerships, getting the local financial institutions on board with it and being part of your system and having them understand, I think, is a really critical component to it.
And I appreciate Connie for including the TBD on a lender to be a part of the formation group. We have reached out to several lenders, and 2 have expressed interest in participating in the structuring of the community land trust. So we already do have some local partners who are interested in the Grounded Solutions Network, the same organization that puts together the video that Connie had showed. They have participated in webinars through the Grounded Solutions Network, so they're getting more information about the structure of a community land trust and how they operate.
Is it possible to have somebody from, you mentioned Door County was a successful startup. Is that a source of information that could be presented to the board here that would give examples of how a smaller community is approaching the issues with some of these topics? Or if Madison or Milwaukee's fairly recent, or you mentioned La Crosse, are those sources of information that could be presented to us that wouldn't cost us the money right away, but would give us examples of how they're doing it and how they've structured some of these, answered some of these structural questions?
It's possible, I'm sure, to maybe arrange that.
Mariah Good, as the planning director for Door County, I know her relatively well. And I will note, Door County actually recommended Julie to us. They said that she was the one who did a lot of the base work for them to get because they had been talking about it for a number of years and were kind of spinning their tires because they didn't know how to approach it. And then through some, I believe, conferences, Mariah had met Julie, and the county hired Julie to come in and do exactly what we're asking her to do, and that really helped kickstart the establishment of their community land trust. And theirs is a little different. There's, I think, some public-private monies involved. They've been working with their local habitat as well, and they've been mainly focused on new construction.
And the group has met with the Madison Area Community Land Trust, their new director.
Milwaukee as well,
and
La Crosse. All of them.
Did meet with the Cooley Cap director. So
we've done a lot of research already. They've already agreed, and we've met with each of those community land trusts that are in Wisconsin.
Well, my assumption, let's take, for example, new construction. My assumption is there's going to have to be significant reduction in cost in order to make new construction affordable for somebody that's 80% LMI.
And that's where the subsidies come in from private and public investment.
What I'm saying is, I want to see some sort of sense of a scale of what we're talking about. Where is that subsidy coming from? And how much money are we talking about?
Right.
I mean, if you're talking about new construction at $250, $300 a square foot, and you're putting together, make my math simple, 1,000 square feet, you're talking about a $300,000 structure before land. To make that affordable for the PITI, you're going to be talking about a very significant reduction or subsidy of some sort. Where is that coming from, and what are the examples the other communities have done? And before we get into that and take that step over off the cliff, where's that money coming from? And there may be sources of funding. The TIF funding may be one of them, but the question is, does this group want to put that kind of significant subsidy into one structure versus multiple structures where we're trying to rehab structures around the city, and you spend, instead of $200,000 for a subsidy for one house, $200,000 buys 5 loans that does 5 houses improvement. That's the kind of concept, that's the kind of conceptual talk I want to have before we hire somebody to write bylaws.
Right. Well, and the interesting thing is that the new development, multi-unit new development, whatever new development is floating around, may not even be the right direction for us.
Exactly
So, and that's where Julie can point us in the right direction, with helping us with the market research and everything else that she has on her scope of work there. Otherwise, we're really shooting in the dark on this. Even with all of the research we've done as a work group and all of the different community land trusts we've talked to and the different coalitions that we're each a part of, still we need this extra guidance.
So you're telling me that group that's on your committee has not even wrestled with the issue of new construction, how much money, where we're going with this. All they want to do is do a land trust, but we don't know what we want or where we're going to go with it.
Well, so Door County is a good example. They built a home that's on Community Land Trust. The home is now sold. They own the land. The Community Land Trust owns the land. The CLT built the home, and essentially the home was, let's say, $200,000 to build. They sold it for $180,000. The CLT covered the $20,000 subsidy. That $20,000 subsidy was backfilled through private donation and some public investment. So the CLT was made whole.
And that's exactly the kind of information I'd like to have.
Sure.
So that is one example.
Right. If the CLT pursues only new construction, I think we know that the Milwaukee folks, they do or have done some acquisition that's not new construction. They've done some rehab. And so, the challenge, and Mr. Barrett could probably talk about rehabbing, is once you start opening up walls, all of a sudden it becomes a lot more expensive than you initially anticipated. But yeah, I think that's where you're asking all the right questions, which I totally appreciate. It's just we're at this weird crossroads with the CLT work group where we're like, we don't have the expertise, the knowledge, or in some cases the time or ability to go out and do more exploration. And that's why we're asking to bring Julian to help get us to the next phase of this discussion, which I think we'll get some clarity on, if it's new construction, how do others do it? How do they backfill that? Are there WIDA programs? Are there federal programs that will offset that subsidy so that the burden isn't 100% taken on the municipality or the CLT itself? But we don't, I don't have time to go out, on a regular basis and ask. Chris doesn't. A lot of folks in the CLT don't. But it's a coalition of folks that recognize that the affordability and homeownership is a huge issue within this area, and we are trying to find some solution to that.
Go ahead.
I have not seen the smaller proposal. None of us have seen that. Mm-hmm. But I will make a motion that we hire Julie Bruner to do the partial, get us started, consultant fees that the director alluded to before, at the cost of, was it $5,000?
$5,000 or $6,000.
Well, what's the number?
$5,500.
$5,500.
Not to exceed.
Not to exceed.
Including all incidentals.
But does that mean that the second half might be $9,000 now? Because we're getting it in 2 pieces?
My question.
It's a real possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
I had not thought of that.
Motion dies for lack of a second. I have a question. How does the RDA fit into this CLT? On the overall operation, decisions, that type of thing? Or are we just the mechanism to donate the land and any funds that we may have available?
That is a great question. If you don't mind, if
No,
I
go
can
ahead.
step in and answer that one. So municipalities and redevelopment authorities, community development authorities participate in a few ways. They play a strong role in helping found and start community land trusts, but then they can also sit on the board of directors for a community land trust if they so choose to. So a fantastic role for any community member to play within a community land trust, but there isn't an expectation that the board members here participate on that board of directors, but it is open and available, and that could appear in the structure if the redevelopment authority is willing to or interested in pursuing that. It is fairly common for community development staff or redevelopment authority staff to step in and play a role on those boards.
I guess my question is if we're donating all this land and potentially all this money, and we don't have any type of an active role other than if we have the staff there would be great, but that says City of Stevens Point. It does not say City or Redevelopment Authority in your briefing.
So let's just take a step back, and I think what's important to discuss here is the funds that we have within the Housing Trust Fund. That is really one of the main roles of the Redevelopment Authority. The trust fund was established with the sale of lots from Whitetail subdivision with the purpose of redeveloping homes within the core of the city, right? That was the whole concept behind it. Currently active, there's $250,000 within that fund. That doesn't include the additional probably $350,000 that we have in a certificate of deposit, right? So there's a fair amount of money that this body is sitting on that's collecting really good interest, but isn't out in the community improving the core of the city, which is really the goal, I think, not only of the Community Land Trust, but the Redevelopment Authority. So there is some obligation or responsibility the Redevelopment Authority will take on because you have the financial means to be a partner in this and really, I think, establish and get the CLT off to a good start so that it can really become its own functioning organization. Second, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a handful of scattered sites, 2nd Street, Strong's Avenue. Those are the two that come to mind immediately. I know we've got, I think, 3 or 4 more. Not to mention some of the other sites the city has bought with the intention of doing some subdivision development that, you could sell to the CLT or donate to the CLT just to get property tax revenue off of there and use maybe the trust fund as a subsidy. I think there's a lot of moving parts here, and I don't want to continue to pound this idea, but we do need the Redevelopment Authority and or the city at the table for the initial kickoff of the Community Land Trust, just to make sure that it's successful in and of itself. And really, city staff brought it in front of the Redevelopment Authority because of the funds that we have in the Housing Trust Fund and what those funds are supposed to be used for, as opposed to sitting in a CD collecting decent interest rates. So just to get everything out there on the table, that's where I see the Redevelopment Authority's role in this. If the RA is not interested, then I think city staff would likely take this through city council and the finance committee because city staff feels that this is a really important step for this community to take in order to address the affordable housing components. So
I agree with Commissioner Gardner. I think there's just too many questions right now to move forward without getting some additional information back to this commission.
Well, I'm not sure that, again, as I said to begin with, I was involved with CAP trying to get home ownership established in the 90s, and what happened when the economy went south, a lot of those properties were lost because of foreclosures. So I support the program. I support the concept. Getting back to the structural organization, I've read that RDAs, cities can actually be the trust, and they can actually operate and run the whole system. In fact, sometimes because of the requirements of oversight, there's a need for staffing. And so a city like Milwaukee maybe has a large enough portfolio that they can support, and they can't. Okay.
Not just yet, they don't. They have one full-time executive director, and then they just brought on a part-time admin kind of a person.
And I saw that Madison was...
only have 5 homes right now. They're working on their next...
Madison's looking for university students to be helping on some of the oversight. So it's more than just getting the structures out there. There's a lot of hand-holding, there's a lot of oversight that's required that may fall back to the city because nobody else has got the staff to do it. I mean, that was part of the question I had about organization, is who's going to do this
Right.
work that's required from now until in perpetuity.
Yep.
So it could be the RDA actually staffs up and does this, or is the only one that has the resources to do it. That's part of what she's going to tell us, I suspect.
And I can tell you, too, CAP Services is quite dedicated to the idea of a community land trust. And we do have the staff, or we would be, we have different options to acquire the staff, at least one
Right.
part-time staff to start with.
So I'm not necessarily, in fact, I support it because the habitat model is such that you win the lottery and you move on. And so that was the fault with that. There was a 5 or 7 year buyback, but after that time is up, you win, and the house is no longer maybe affordable. But so anyway, it's just a matter of how we get into this, and do we jump all the way off the cliff at once, or do we just do it incrementally? That's my only take on it.
And that was one thing, if I may, Chair, city staff looked at. Originally, Chris and I were saying, well, why doesn't the Redevelopment Authority serve as the land trust? I mean, we've got the land, we've got the finances behind it, but,
Exactly.
we saw the bigger picture of there's an interest with CAP, there's an interest with Habitat for Humanity, and so we didn't want to just, play in our own sandbox. We wanted to get others involved, and that's really why we're looking to the Redevelopment Authority to help kick off this whole program. And at the end of the day, it might come back and the Redevelopment Authority, which used to function as the Community Development Authority, may be the group that oversees the CLT. And maybe you have a subcommittee or subcommission that of this body that actually manages that program specifically.
We've got the resources that nobody
Right.
else has got. I mean, come on, we're going to be the center of it one way or another. We're either going to feed it or we're going to be it, but
Yep.
we're not going to, we're not going to be that passive.
So, your thoughts? I guess I would probably go back and support the original motion that we didn't get a second to include a lot of these questions that were brought up and not just a canned presentation for $5,000. Try to say, come in more how it affects Stevens Point and get some of the answers if possible.
Just so you're aware, we are looking at a timeline of some, Julie is available beginning September. I can't guarantee that she would be available much after that, and I don't know how long it would take for us to bring more, information and examples and things. It's just kind of an unknown.
That's not a reason to come in and say, we need to do it now without getting more answers. I'm sorry, I can't buy that. Go ahead.
I will make a motion that we support the staff recommendation of $12,000 with the caveat, though, that the staff approach the consultant and ask about an incremental present information being given to the RDA and/or the staff to be shared with us, such that if we want, we can sever the contract at some point if, in fact, we decide not to go that route. Does that make some sense to the person who's responsible for taking the minutes here?
Well, she does say here, the estimate for this work is $12,000.
What's that?
Estimate.
Estimate, yes.
But there's an hourly component
And
to
there's
it.
an
So-
hourly. It will be charged hourly.
All
So,
right, and so that makes sense that we
So
could
then
actually do
that's-
that. And that's what I'm asking for.
pay as you go.
With a
Give
not
us some
to exceed
information
cap, though,
such that,
so.
Right.
how applicable is this going to be to Point and sell us on the project? That's what I'm asking for.
Yeah, well, I think what we would do, sorry, I should let, I think what we do is let Julie come in monthly for our meetings to provide an update to the RDA, or staff can do that, because she will be presenting the CLT work group. So we can provide that update on a regular basis to the Redevelopment Authority, either through email communication or through our meetings. And if there's any concern, we can definitely address that, I think, as part of the contract.
Did we get a second on the motion?
Not yet.
I'll second. I think it's time we put our money where our mouth is.
Thank you.
And, I mean, this person basically is the expert in the field. And again, it seems like a small investment to get people into housing and to stabilize the community.
Bring the motion back, Director.
Okay, the motion would be to support, authorize the $12,000, up to $12,000, as provided that the consultant informs us on incremental information to be shared with the Redevelopment Authority and staff, and its applicability to Stevens Point on a regular basis.
And we have a provision in there that we may cancel that contract at any time.
And that
We feel that it
the
is-
contract is at will. Okay.
Any other questions, comments? We have a motion and we have a second. The director will take the roll.
Schleiss.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Hooper.
Aye.
Barrett.
Aye.
That's 5.
Motion carries.
you very
Request to update housing modernization loan program. Director.
So we've had a lot of success with our housing modernization loan program. Actually, we have, I think, 2 out right now. There's a third kind of in the works. And remember, we just established this, 2 months ago. So we're seeing a lot of success. And kind of surprisingly, we're seeing folks who actually own their homes outright, but don't have the income to go out and get a substantial home equity line and things of that nature. So they're coming to us and seeking this. So the city redevelopment authority, specifically through the loan program, is actually in a really good position on these specific loans because we're first in line on the mortgage, right, in case something would go sour. One of the challenges that we're seeing is that we have residents that fall below what we require for the program itself. And so with that introduction, I'm going to kick it over to Chris to fill you in on that more. Chris has been much more involved with that.
Thanks, Director Karnowski. As the director had mentioned, we've had a lot of community interest within the program. We've had 6 applications come through at this point. 2 of them were deemed ineligible and would not be accepted. 2 of them on the fence with some details I'll express later, and 2 that we were able to approve internally. We received dozens of phone calls regarding the program, and we received another letter for, I guess, request for more information this morning. So it's continuing to be well received by the community. We're really excited about that. Some of the applicants, as we are monitoring the program and trying to gear it up to be successful into the long term, we really aim to see us reach that maximum $100,000 loaned out to the community within the first year, so that we are reacquiring those funds to be redistributed and covering our costs for the software to manage the program and staff time. So majority of the projects or the requests that we've received up to this point have been for a smaller amount of funds. That no application has been for the maximum loan amount of $30,000. Residents are really looking for 1 or 2 projects at a time in the range of $12,000 to $25,000 to work on their home. And the middle ground, the few of the applicants who have applied but have not been completely eligible have been in an income range of between 60% and 80%. They have a very low debt to income ratio, but because they don't meet the eligibility requirements as originally outlined, we can't internally approve them for a loan through the program. So Mark Cordes and I, who have been charged with establishing these programs and maintaining them, have been designing or redesigning with some assistance some changes to the eligibility requirements so that we are managing our risk within the program and making it more available to residents who are seeking less funds essentially for the project. So the main modifications that we are looking for input in and approval are within that first paragraph of eligible program participants, establishing a debt-to-income ratio within that paragraph, and a stipulation that if someone fall below or between that 60-80%, that there is two options for us to still approve a loan for them if they are below a debt-to-income ratio of 35%. Or the City of Stevens Point is the first mortgage on the home. But with that, I would like to open that up for discussion with you all. We're really excited to see the program have such interest within the community, and we're really hopeful that the first year is proving to be successful.
How are you advertising this or getting the word out to these homes?
So we announced a press release in April for Fair Housing Month. And that press release announced some of the success of our previous programs. We also have started a mailer program, which Maria has been fantastic in helping us get through and start, that any new homeowner within the community is notified of our building code and building inspection requirements and all of our housing programs that the city has. So all of the grants and loans are now being advertised to every new homeowner within the community. We are posting press releases on an as-needed basis just to match staff capacity. So because of so much interest, we haven't announced any more press releases because my phone has been ringing nonstop. So
yeah, so when we did the initial press release, Channel 7 and 9 came down, did interviews, and that really seemed to get, we had people from outside the city calling us and asking if we would loan them money, like City of Wausau, which was bizarre. But so we are seeing some success there. And then a lot of times, too, we will include in violation orders, if you get a notice to replace your roof within 12 months, we actually send along with those violation orders resources from homeowners so that they, and this is included as part of that, if they can't necessarily afford to replace their roof with cash, there are other resources for them to do that. So we also turn them on to the Neighbor Helping Neighbor grant program, which has also really taken off the last few months as we've changed the parameters of that specific program.
Have you looked at putting or including them in the tax bills or with the reval letter that's coming out?
Reval letter's a little late. That is already at the printer. But it would probably be worthwhile to look at for the tax bill. I know the Public Works Department is including letters with utility bills, so there are other ways for us to do it. What we don't want to do is provide information overload to our residents when they get bills from the city. Hey, here's a bill you need to pay, and here's ways we can help you. So I think we're trying to find a balance there with our utility and our Public Works Department and some of the tax bills as well.
One of the target groups, and you already mentioned, is people that already own their home. How are they finding out about this project? And what I'm thinking of is the person on a fixed income owns the house, lived there for 40 years, and the furnace goes out, the roof needs replacing. How are they finding out?
Either getting referrals back to us from CAP services or through just their own interactions with the Community Development Department. If they get an order for, replace your roof or fix windows or replace siding, that's another one as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking possibly too, some of the contractors, the furnace people or the other people could be a source of information.
Yep, so the contractors, Superior Roofing just did one of the roofs in town here. Now that they're aware of the program, they're going to encourage their customers to use it more if they meet the eligibility requirements. So I think part of it too is just getting the contractors aware of the situation.
That's what I was going to suggest.
Three additional ways that we've been reaching folks for the programs. Mark Cordes and I have been meeting with real estate groups in the community. So we've met with First Weber and KPR. We're slowly adding in them to our monthly outreach plans. We've also been in contact with the director of the ADRC as well. A lot of those folks do own their homes, and they don't want to leave their homes, so they are a prime candidate for the program. So I was really excited to share that with Cindy Petruski over at the ADRC. And there was another one that is escaping my brain right now, but I'm glad you brought that up. We're really excited to offer that up for folks who are on a fixed income.
Yeah, yeah.
What I would suggest, since there's not a lot of people that get the newspapers or anything else or listen to this, most of it's off of TV, is that we send out an annual letter, say at least for 3 years, to all residential zone homes valued at $250,000 or less, and give them a direct mail, and that would get the information to them. It'd be separate, it wouldn't be included with anything else. And I don't think it would cost us that much, because the system should be able to generate those property to mailing labels.
It's probably a few $1,000s. That's been our experience from other mass mailers.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
That's
Mr.
what
Chairman,
I
I'd
would
make a
suggest we
motion
do with the
that,
program. Pardon?
I'd make a motion that we approve the amendments as proposed.
We have a second. Any other second to Jim?
And
Any questions?
Before you do that, as a comment, I'm very pleased that staff has gotten this program going. It's been years and a different director, and we've struggled with it in RDA. It's like you said before, we're sitting on cash, and we don't want cash, we want projects.
Yeah.
And so I'm really pleased to see that this is finally getting going, so.
Yep. And this specific loan program is funded out of, I guess, an annual budget allocation by the city council. So all of our grant programs and loan programs are currently funded not necessarily the Housing Trust Fund. It's funded from a specific allocation from the city council. So we haven't even touched the Housing Trust Fund monies yet.
Well, again, if resources are needed, I'm not sure. I'm surprised to hear you say that we're not funding it. So if resources are needed, I certainly want to apply these sources, our resources, to these programs.
We had a similar program back in the 70s that the city ran, and we had a lot of loans. As a matter of fact, I myself got a loan to fix up the house, and way back when, and we had 2 staff people that handled it all the time. So, yeah, so this is something that I think that most of us understand, more so than the CDL or whatever, CLT, and we should support it. And this is where we're able to try and get the money out to the people that can really use it. So. That being said, Director, take the roll.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I have a question. Chris, as the longer I stare at this and kind of hash it out in my head, it reminds me of something one of my college professors said to our class once, which was, it's not the money coming in, it's the money going out. Okay? So I guess, why do we care? Why do we have a minimum? Why do we have a minimum income limit at all? If we have a debt ratio component, we don't need it. We can have I totally agree with the maximum. Most help programs, down payment assistance programs, you name it, they have a cap, 80% AMI, 100, whatever it may be, 100% of AMI. That's fine. But why have a minimum?
Sure, I appreciate the question. Back when we originally constructed the program and shared that information with you, we designed the program with the income limitations such that there are other tools available to residents who are earning 80% or less that are substantially more beneficial for complete renovation of their homes, that we really wanted to guide residents to those programs if they are eligible for them. And so we designed this program to be a gap-filling program as well as benefiting the homeowners within the community. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't taking away potential clients from CAP services and the CDBG programs. But that's as we are finding out, though, there are folks who are straddling that 80%, who are interested in 1 or 2 projects who would not be interested in a complete renovation of their home. So expanding it a little bit slowly at first, I think, is helpful for us as staff to manage and throttle the interest in the program. But I appreciate the question. I think it can be expanded, especially if we are utilizing the debt-to-income ratios for underwriting.
And do you already have, and I'm sorry, I'm looking right now, do you already have language in here that gives you some leeway on underwriting?
Tell me more.
I guess, I'm talking maybe like compensating factors. Like a lot of times in the underwriting world, if one category in the underwriting world, if one category is not very good, but 3 others are, that's compensating factors. So I'm just wondering if you have some latitude worked in here.
We don't at this point, no.
Okay.
However, with our potential applicants, we do ask if there is a category in which you don't meet the eligibility requirements, they can come to this body and explain that.
Okay.
So that is our one catch.
A few times redevelopment authorities approved folks who are just above the income threshold. I think there's been 2 or 3, at least with my tenure at the city, where we brought it back in front of this body. And I think it's important for us to retain that because of protecting staff. I'd hate to approve something and something goes sour. I prefer to have more eyes on it, especially from the governing body.
Okay.
On the question, that's a good question on the minimum income. Are we excluding the number of homes in this in this city because they don't have the minimum income, but they may be retired, so their income isn't at that level, but they still may have assets that they can make their payments and that type of thing?
We do look at Social Security income, pension income, retirement income as part of the overall.
Just looking, it says earned income, and that means earned versus pensions, Social Security.
Yeah, we have looked at just overall income for these programs in the past. I think to an earlier point that, it's not that we don't want, you could get rid of the minimum if you really wanted to, but part of what I think this body wants to do and what staff wants to do is you've got this group of folks who don't meet the income requirements for some other like CAP programs or other state-based programs that fall outside of, just outside of that income restriction. This is where we're kind of backfilling some of that. If you completely get rid of it, now they're not going through CAP services or they're not going through the state programs. They're coming straight to the city. And I think having the minimum on here is a really important step for us to be a resource, but not the only resource that folks are pursuing.
What we ran into regularly at CAP was someone who didn't qualify for weatherization, which was like the catch-all, right? That was a great program for them. They didn't qualify for that, and they did qualify for a regular rehab program, but they didn't want everything.
Right.
That would be the classic situation, right? They didn't want to have to redo the entire house. They didn't want to take that much equity out.
Right.
Exactly.
So this fills that gap.
And actually, I'm sympathetic to that. I think that we should, for the retired person who doesn't want to rehab the whole house, but just wants to fix that roof or fix that furnace that's not working,
Right.
I'm sympathetic to creating or allowing them to be part of this program.
Federal program, they want to protect their investment. They want the whole house rehabbed.
Right.
Totally get it.
Right.
This helps them out where they need it.
But the minimum income that they've brought up excludes them from this program if they're a retired person, a single retired person.
Possibly, yeah.
And they may have investments that keeps them going, but they don't have the income.
Well, no, that's included in the income, like a tax income, but we exclude them because of the minimum income. They make too little, and yet CAP makes them do the whole house, so they don't want to do that. So now they're stuck.
I think maybe instead of rolling in, those specific folks into the specific program, let's have staff look at what other loan programs we could offer and what those could be structured like. Because I think, I don't want to blow this up too, we only have so much staff time, energy, and money, most notably. So I don't want to, let us look at what other ultra-low income stuff we can do with other modernization, and let's just keep this one as is. That would be my recommendation with the changes that staff's proposed.
All right, but I would like to address that issue of the people who have low income but don't want to redo the electric, redo the roof. All they want is a furnace.
Right.
Just keep me warm.
Can we review this again? I'm sure we'll get updates on it.
Sure.
See how things are going.
Happy to provide updates.
Yeah, and maybe keep track of who didn't qualify or who didn't want to go through
Well,
with it.
and that's why it's before you, because
Yep.
we're seeing some folks on the fringe, right?
Right.
So,
And that's the better information than the successful ones.
Right.
Are the ones that weren't successful.
Exactly
Yep,
right.
we are tracking all of the applications that are coming through, those who are approved or not approved, and
That's great.
and noting why.
How many applications have you been averaging in a 6-month period or a year? Or
In a 6-month period, well, we've only had the program available for 2 months. And we've had 6 filled out applications, and I haven't documented every single phone call that I've answered, but we've had 6 applications turned in.
Other questions, comments? And yes, we'll have a update on it periodically, quarterly.
yeah.
Okay. That's not part of the motion, but I would say that we could do that. Director will take the roll.
Schleiss.
Aye.
Gardner.
Aye.
Kneebone.
Aye.
Cooper.
Aye.
Barrett.
Aye.
And I would like to see us do a direct mailing too to the people to get the word out. Because you don't know where to advertise anymore because it's so helter-skelter.
ADRC's.
Yeah, we can do the direct mailing. We can put something
Okay.
together and run it by you administratively.
Appreciate that. We are adjourned. Thank you for coming today.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.